All right, here we have the latest in action cameras from both of the major manufacturers. We have the GoPro Hero 13 Black against this one right here, the DJI Action 5 Pro. And with how fast DJI innovates, the Action 5 Pro has come out with a bunch of new technology and features. And a lot of people might be wondering, did DJI actually pass GoPro with this new release? So in this video, let's go through some of the main features that I look for when using action cameras. And as far as context use cases for action cameras, I think that's pretty important because of the fact that you want to ideally watch videos that line up with how you might be using them. So for me, I use these types of action cameras for daily documentation. If I'm out there with my kids, whether I'm filming them playing basketball or if I'm at the beach or we're at an amusement park, I will grab these types of cameras instead of my phone. Now, the first thing, of course, we're talking about image quality. How do these cameras look in both bright daylight as well as in low light? Now, those are just some side-by-side shots of these two cameras in a bunch of different scenarios. Let me know in the comment section down below which one did you guys prefer, the Action 5 footage or the GoPro Hero 13. Next, we'll talk about sensor size. The DJI Action 5 Pro has a 1/1.3 inch CMOS sensor. It's an all-new sensor on this camera, while here on the GoPro Hero 13, we have a little bit smaller of a sensor, 1/1.9 inch. Now, what does that really mean? Well, with a larger sensor, ideally you're going to be able to capture in a lot more light on that sensor, which will produce a little bit better of a quality in lower light scenarios. So if you do shoot a lot more indoors, or if you shoot a sunrise, sunset, or at night, you want to go with that larger sensored camera. Ideally, it should produce you a little bit higher quality of a video in those situations. Next, we'll talk about touchscreen. And the one thing I do like about the Action 5 Pro is that they increase the size of their touchscreen compared to the Action 4 and compared to the GoPro Hero 13. Now, the big difference here on the Action 5 is that we have dual front and rear OLED touchscreens, where here on the GoPro, we only have a rear touchscreen. You are not able to touch the front. Now, of course, depending on how you use your camera, you might not care to have a front touchscreen. Maybe you're the type to just mount your camera, hit record, and let it be. However, the ability to touch that front screen, change your settings, is really nice in scenarios, especially if you're doing something like a vlog where you're pointing the camera back at yourself. Now, when it comes out to video resolution, the GoPro 13 actually has an edge up on the Action 5 Pro. Here on the Hero 13, we do have a video resolution of 5.3K up to 60 frames a second, while here on the Action 5 Pro, we have 4K up to 120 frames a second. Now, for the most part, I'm normally always shooting and editing and exporting out in 4K. So the 5.3K, even though it is a higher resolution, I will normally still bring it back down to 4K on my export. And because of that, the 5.3K, while there is some benefit with having a little larger video resolution, in case you wanted to punch in just a little bit or you want to move your video around that space, because you're going to be exporting out in 4K, so you do have some wiggle room to move your video around or to punch in a little bit. But for the most part, I'm still going to be exporting out in 4K, and both these shoot 4K 120. This one shoots 5.3, 60 frames a second. Next key feature we'll talk about is internal storage, and I'm finally happy to say that the DJI Action 5 does have 47 gigs internal storage, which means if you forget your memory card or you just don't have one, that is extremely clutch. That's something that I've been hoping for a very long time with action cameras, especially also with drones. having the backup internal space is a nice feature to have. Next, we'll talk about photos and photo options. Now here on the Action 5, we have 40 megapixels as far as photo goes. Here on the GoPro Hero 13, 27 megapixels. Now while we have a bump up in megapixels here, the GoPro I think does take it as far as photo options go. There's a bunch of different modes when it comes down to time-lapse modes. You're able to do different things like star trails, light painting, vehicle lights, night lapse, as well as a few others here on the GoPro, which are really nice features. And I would think that DJI can do some sort of software update to include very similar presets that GoPro has. Next, we'll talk about a little bit more user experience things that I've been noticing. And for me, just the way I normally use my camera, the user experience on the DJI Action 5 is far superior than the GoPro. Now, some of the main things for me that have really sealed the deal as far as the way I use my camera is we have things like the quick switch mode here, which allows you to then toggle quickly through preset profiles that you have saved. So if you like to shoot in a bunch of different styles, frame rates, you're able to save those and then easily access them by that quick switch button here. You can do that here somewhat with the GoPro, except you have to have a double press. You have to click here, and then on top, and go through it that way. A little bit easier on the Action. Next is startup and record time. So if you're out there in the field and you want to quickly hit record and film something, the Action starts up and records about 2 seconds quicker than the GoPro 13. Being an action camera, you don't want to miss anything, and that quicker start time definitely does come in handy on the Action 5 Pro. Now what's cool is that when they released the Hero 13 Black, we had a few different slow-mo options, which I'm happy to see on these action cameras. You can actually take your footage and be able to slow it down and have it still be really, really smooth. Now, for options, we have burst slow-mo on the GoPro. You can shoot up to 16 by 9, 900 or 900p at 360 frames a second, or if you wanted it lower resolution at 720p, 400 frames a second, which is pretty cool as far as having those little quick burst modes. The thing I saw though is that the resolution 720 and 900 are pretty darn low considering the baseline I would say would be 1080p, especially if you're watching on your mobile phone. 1080p I would say is probably the lowest you're going to want to go. And here on the DJI Action 5, we have 1080p, 240 frames a second, which you can have straight out of camera. However, they also have a new feature, which I don't think a lot of people are even tested or even talking about. You have the ability to slow that 240 frames a second all the way down to 960 frames a second while still maintaining a 1080p video resolution. And for me, the bigger thing here is that you actually have field of view options on the DJI Action 5, where here on the GoPro, you are stuck with either linear or narrow, which means you can't be too close to your subject. Next, we'll talk about battery life, and both of these cameras have come out with new batteries for their action cameras. GoPro just released their new battery for the Hero 13. Now, while that's definitely a positive for those that are buying the Hero 13 as their first camera, the downside is that it is a new style battery in a new shape, which means if you buy the Hero 13, you can't use your Hero 12, 11, 10 batteries on this one. We have a whole new designed battery on the 13, so you're gonna need to pick up a bunch of new batteries here if you were to go this route. DJI has also released a new battery for the Action 5 Pro, but the great thing is it's the same style, same shape, same connectors, which means you are able to use your Action 4 batteries as well as your Action 3 batteries on the DJI Action 5. Now, if you do buy the Action 5 as your first camera, note that you are going to get a better battery. It's a 1950 milliamp battery here versus the 1770 milliamp battery what we have on the Action 4. These new batteries definitely give us a lot more shooting time as well. DJI is rating their new battery to shoot up to 4 hours at 1080p, 24 frames a second. And here on the GoPro with their new battery, you're able to shoot up to 2.5 hours. All right, so I'm doing a little test as far as how long they're going to record for. Now, the GoPro has been recording 5K. That's the highest resolution at 30 frames a second, or I'm shooting at 5K 30. I know it can go up to 60, but I'm going to shoot at the higher resolutions that I normally shoot at, 4K on the Action 5 Pro, 4K at 30 frames a second. Now, everyone that does these tests, they're always going to be different. I'm just doing it right here in the studio, and for some odd reason, the GoPro one, even the latest and greatest GoPro, it stopped recording at 50% battery. And I've seen so many tests online where people have gone longer, people have gone shorter, people have gone, taking it outside in heat. I'm just doing a basic one here. I have a time lapse going on this one, the DJI Action 5. It's been 1 hour and 42 minutes recording at 4K 30. Screen has gone on and off because it auto shuts off. The GoPro stopped recording at 50%. I have to look at the exact time. I think it was around the 40-minute mark. And then I would power it back on and hit record, and then it would power on. It will record for another couple minutes, shut back off. Battery is just depleting as we go. I mean, I already killed the battery. It's at 1%. And here on the DJI Action 5, we're still at 30. There you go. See, it turned off already. We're still at 35, 36%. And this is non-stop recording. This I've had to restart back on, I'd probably say about 6 or 7 times already. So I'm pretty much done with it now that the battery finally depleted. But it's just definitely interesting because I was hoping that the GoPro battery would have lasted longer. And a lot of people will say, well, action cameras aren't meant to just sit there. They're meant to be used in a way where you're going to be having air pass through it. Yes and no. I know a lot of people that use action cameras like GoPros that hook it up to the fence of a baseball game and let it run the entire time, which means you're going to be outside in the heat, which is a lot more, taxing than putting it here in a studio where it's about, 75 or 77 degrees. So I think everyone's going to run into their own different types of scenarios and use cases, but just doing a basic studio test, the GoPro did not last long at all. I was really hoping that the new battery would be a little bit better. The DJI Action 5 is still going. This has not shut down yet, no overheat, no nothing. And I do have everything recorded here on a time lapse that's going every 2 seconds. So you can see it on my time lapse, that nothing has been messed with, and we are still going. Next we'll talk about is the quick release or quick mounts that DJI started a few years ago with the Action 2. We now have something very similar with the GoPro Hero 13. GoPro on this release has integrated, you have the kind of feet here to hook up to the standard GoPro mounts or the action camera mounts. You also have a quarter 20 here at the very bottom, which is really cool. And you have the ability to hook it up with a magnet mount, very similar to what we have here on the DJI Action 5 Pro. I actually really like this mount on the GoPro one, mainly because of that quarter 20 there. I'm hoping DJI can add a quarter 21 into this mount or into the bottom of the camera on their next release to give us that option. However, the one thing that I saw when I purchased the GoPro Hero 13, which I was pretty bummed about, is that they don't include that quick release mount or the quick magnet mount. It's actually a full separate $25 purchase that the DJI Action 5 does include in their purchase price. And speaking of purchase price, the Action comes in at $349, while the GoPro Hero 13 comes in at $399. Next feature I really like on the Action 5 Pro that they just released is that you are now able to hook up 2 external microphones to this camera. Now with the release of the 13, GoPro did open it up to accept third-party mics, so you can actually use a DJI mic 2 with the GoPro via Bluetooth or via Bluetooth on both of them. What's nice about the Action 5 is that you're able to hook up 2 wireless mics, and here on the GoPro, you can hook up 1. And finally, speaking of those accessories, I think this is the one thing that I think GoPro tried pushing on their customers this time around, and that is they didn't exactly, in my opinion, enhance the camera itself or the user experience. They kept almost all of that the same as the Hero 12. The thing that they stepped up on, or they wanted to, I would say, market the most, is the ability to hook up a bunch of different accessories like a wide angle lens, a macro lens, as well as an ND filter set that you could put to the front of this camera. The one thing for me is that even though I have the GoPro 12 and I have the wide angle lens on that one, I try not to hook up anything to these cameras because I just want to use them as they are. Whenever I have to stop and change something out, it really takes away from what I'm doing. And with those accessories do come at a price. When you start adding up the $400 camera and you add on a wide angle plus a macro lens, that number goes from $400 to $500 and up. And then also, again, the magnetic mounts, add another $25 there, which means you now have to buy a bunch of them if you want to hook up your helmet cam to your chest mount to your car mount. You're gonna need to buy a bunch of different mounts with this camera, versus here we have mounts that have been made not only by DJI, but also a bunch of third-party mounts that work just as good, and they come in at a fraction of the price. So at the end of the day, when I have to grab a camera, to be honest with you, I'm still gonna be grabbing the DJI one, mainly because they are focusing, in my opinion, on what really matters. They enhanced the sensor. They're giving us better dynamic range. And also just look at the pace of innovation. I feel like GoPro has been at a standstill with their action camera, where DJI has been evolving and making major iterations this is only Action 5. We're on Hero 13. So you're talking about how fast they're changing up and changing the camera and the specs and usability on these cameras. If you guys have recently picked up these cameras, let me know if my opinion kind of lines up with yours, and if not, also let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you guys haven't seen my full review video on the Action 5 Pro, make sure you guys check it out. I actually go through even more side-by-side comparisons with the Hero 13, as well as all of the other action cameras on the market, like the Action 4, the Go 3, as well as the Ace Pro. If you guys got some value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. This is Aljon Stasio with FlytPath.com. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.